So DC Animation has released their Constantine, the House of Mystery animated short, and I was gonna do a review, like a full-blown review on this, but it's a little shorter than 30 minutes, so there's not a whole lot to go off of. So I decided to kind of make this video more of my thoughts on what the short is and what it does for the, I guess, now finished DC animated movie universe, and where that kind of leaves us with that going forward. So starting off, this is basically Justice League Dark Apokolips War 1.5. That's what I'd call that. So after the events of Justice League Dark Apokolips War, John Constantine asks the Flash to basically reverse the events of Darkseid's war, and in doing so, he finds himself waking up in the House of Mystery, and we get some backstory to that where he basically crosses paths with the Spectre, who banishes John to the house because he did a no-no, and that's his punishment for all eternity. And this basically causes John to relive day after day being with his friends and loved ones. So he thinks, because they basically, while they may appear friendly and loving, they basically turn into demons and they rip him to shreds every day. So that's his life. So that's basically what the short is about. And as far as like a quick review, I thought that the short was, for the most part, it did a good job of keeping Constantine fans happy, because you get to be, more in that world and the magic, seeing more demons, which is what Constantine fans love. And in the other sense, it, I think, gives hope and teases fans of the DC animated movie universe. They think, oh, if they're continuing the story, then they obviously are going to maybe keep going, and they'll, I want more. And that was how I felt about it. I was like, oh, that's so great. That's what I want. I want more of that universe, those characters, those stories. So I did also like that they had new characters that I was not familiar with, and some that they brought back from previous movies. So the Spectre was obviously one. I've heard about him, but I'm not too familiar with him. So he was in there. And we also got to see some demons return, as far as Nurgle and Chaz. So, those were good to see those. The animation style from the previous film also made its entrance several times in the movie, and even like kind of crossed with that. So there's a scene where the Spectre is talking to John Constantine, and the other John Constantine is kind of watching like a flashback, and the John Constantine talking to the Spectre is the John Constantine animation style from Apokolips War and the previous DC animated movie universe, not like the one that we have in this movie, which I thought was pretty cool. And for y'all are like, well, that's no big deal, Justin. But for me, I'm like, that means that they can still continue it. But like I said, this is not a whole lot to go off of, but the short just gives us a glimpse of, I believe that there's more story to tell, and I definitely want to see more. So where does this lead for the future of the DC animated movie universe? Because that's what I want to know. So like I said, the short is clearly a continuation of Justice League Apokolips War, and it leaves the door open, I think, for us to revisit these characters all over again, or, like as a reboot style, or maybe just kind of like throw them in as we go on as far as flashbacks or multiverse or something. But will that happen? That's part of the question. So the DC animated movie universe was originally made of 17 films and 2 shorts, spanning over almost a decade, and it's pretty much like the MCU of animated films, in my opinion. They incorporate a lot of stories, from the Batman animated series, Superman animated series. They had a lot of stuff from Flashpoint and the New 52 series from the comic books. So they, intertwined a lot of stories and gave us a lot of one-offs, but they all kind of made it all connect, which is similar to the MCU. And I personally really enjoyed that, and I'd hope that that continues. Now, in saying all that, with the DC Animation's 2022 release schedule, it doesn't leave me very hopeful. But we got Catwoman Hunted, which I previously reviewed, and it's in the link down below. Just leave it at that. And then we're going to have DC League of Super Pets, which is going to be a theatrical release. And then we're going to have Green Lantern, Beware My Power, Merry Little Batman, which is a TV animated series around Christmas for Cartoon Network, Teen Titans Go versus DC Superhero Girls, and Battle of Super Sons. So the only movies listed on that are from that list that kind of give me hope that the DC animated movie universe could continue in some form or fashion is going to be, of course, this Constantine short and the Green Lantern movie. But other than that, those other films are just one-offs, and they're not really, I don't see how they could ever bring those into the DC animated movie universe. They're just going to be one-offs and separate. Now, there's plenty of source material, I think, to still explore, that they could still take the characters that they've talked about in the previous stories and movies and still pull them into other, movies and shorts, etc. And that would be stuff like Convergence, The Doomsday Clock, Rebirth. I mean, there's tons of comic source material that they could go off of that we haven't yet seen. And I think that's a way to go about it. I mean, the Batman who laughs. I mean, that'd be a great story arc to go through. But there's tons of stuff like that that we could still explore, and they just haven't gotten to it yet. I kind of feel like maybe they're taking this kind of multiple Earths, multiverse. They're doing stuff with that maybe because of the way Flashpoint ended. That was a way of kind of rebooting it, and that gives them kind of freedom to just kind of start with a clean slate, which is okay and it's respectable, I guess. But I think for fans of DC animated movies, because they did get a lot of critical praise and a lot of people liked them. That was why we liked them, is because they had some type of continuation and they were related to each other in some way, which is much like how the MCU works. So I know I'm really loud to MCU, but that's basically how that works. And I think that fans really like that. I know DC is more like the DCEU, or even like DC movies past, they kind of just stuck with the same superhero continuity, but they really didn't relate to each other. And that was fine, but I think a lot of people want to have that big overarching story amongst the mini stories. I kind of relate this a little bit to the Snyderverse. So I know I'm doing some parallels with the live action movies, but there's similar stories here. So, the DC animated movie universe has a fan base, the Snyderverse has a fan base, and people like those movies, and they like the Justice League movie, and they want that continue. I would say that's the same way I would say for the DC animated movie universe. People want that to continue on as well, but still have one-offs, right? So like you have the Batman recently that fans have liked, and they could possibly continue on as like a separate universe. And you also have the Joker. Now I think that they're kind of recreating what the DC movie did, the DCU that is, with the upcoming Flash movie, because there's a potential part where the Flash will, have his own Flashpoint arc and basically undo the Snyderverse of the current DCEU, or set it off on a separate parallel universe, and the Flash ends up in a different universe with different superheroes to go off of. That's why we have Michael Keaton and Sasha Calle's Superwoman or Supergirl. So we're going to have that kind of stuff already, but it'd be kind of cool if they kind of maybe inserted a little bit of the Justice League Dark universe in that too. Maybe get some Constantine, some Zatanna, something like that. So it's possible. So one thing to consider is, would the current Warner Brothers Discovery merger possibly be the reason why we're not getting any more DC animated movie universe type movies? I know that with that, Jeff Johns and some other people that are involved in that kind of storytelling, they're gone. They're not really trying to be included in stuff. So maybe that could be it. And the new leadership is just putting things on hold. So everything that was announced at DC Fandom 2021 was stuff that was already going to be released. So anything that could be coming from the future may just be put on hold. I know that there's been some rumblings that they might want to spin DC into its own, entity separate from Warner Brothers Discovery. So it's possible that maybe they're going to wait for that to happen before we get some, more movies that I think fans can get excited about that are pertaining to the maybe potentially former DC animated movie universe. So one last thing I wanted to talk about real quick is there are a lot of parallels I noticed from this movie that relate to the MCU. Now I know I've talked about the DC animated movie universe being really, similar to the MCU as far as the 10 decades worth of movies and all that kind of stuff, and it being in, well, it wasn't really set in phases, but we have, phase 4 right now with kind of a more newer retelling of new stories that are going to also be interconnected and maybe relate back to the old ones. So maybe DC could do that with the current, set of movies. They could start doing that. It's like, just give us newer movies that can be related to each other that still can maybe tie back to the old and have like a crossover. That'd be kind of cool, right? But I know specifically for this Constantine movie, when you watch it, it gave me a lot of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness vibes as far as what the trailers have shown us as the premise of why Doctor Strange is in trouble. So we know that from the events of Spider-Man, he obviously was trying to do a good thing and it turns out to be a bad thing, and he's obviously being punished by council. So I find that kind of very similar to what happens in Constantine in this movie, where he thought he was doing a good thing by having Flash do, reverse time and undo the events of Darkseid's war. But in the same vein, he gets in trouble and has to answer to the Spectre and has consequences. So it's obviously not exactly like for like, but I find it very interesting that there's some similarities there between Constantine and Doctor Strange. They're both involved with magic and some dark stuff of each their respective universes. So it's very similar that we have that. Now, we've talked about multiverses and multiple Earths in DC for a while now, but nothing like live action or anything like that, mostly in animation and comics. So the MCU is finally getting there, but I think because of those parallels, I think they could each benefit from each other, and maybe the DC animated movies could, kind of pull some playbook from the MCU and get back to what I think fans want to see. So if you've seen Constantine and the House of Mystery, what do you think about the short? Do you want to see more of that as far as relation to the DC animated movie universe? Do you want to see the DC animated movies continue at all? Or if you're happy with the 2022 slate, what other movies would you like to see going forward? Leave your thoughts and comments down below. And that's it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed that like button, subscribe to the channel for videos like this one, and I'll see you guys next time on The Mashup.